Oh yeah, we are here once again, episode number 295 of the Mind Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's still no business like minding your own. Shout out to my guy Eli for doing the intro. As always, I'm always appreciative of him for providing me that. And for those of you that are familiar with the story, he made that intro long ago, long before the Mind Your Business podcast, and I was able to connect with Eli, and he actually changed the name of that for me and provided it to me. So I'm grateful for that. We're recording this on Wednesday, June the 22nd of 2022. There's a ton going on, but hopefully this finds you in good health and good spirits. Again, I'm your host, Ron Brooks, aka Champ Ron. And as I mentioned, this is 295 of the Mind Your Business podcast. Shout out to all of you that have sent your questions, your ideas. I read every one of them. Okay. And so I greatly appreciate all of you for your support and your feedback. Subscribe to the podcast, 5-star, wherever you get your pods. That helps me continue to grow the MYB community. And of course, you can connect with me always on champ10k.com. That's where I've got a ton of resources for those of you that are interested in getting into real estate. As you all know, I've been doing this for a little while now. And one of the best ways to get involved in real estate, in my opinion, is through investing in land, particularly if you want to be an owner as you get started and apply a myriad of different real estate strategies to help grow and curate your reoccurring passive monthly income. That's one of the ways to get ahead of inflation. Whining about the gas prices and all that's not going to do it. You got to increase your income, manage your expenses, and increase your income, right? It's a pretty simple math problem, but we all need a little help in that, right? One of the ways that my team and I help you do that is to get involved in land investing right from where you are today to increase your income. So if you increase your income ahead of inflation, guess what? You'll be doing pretty good, right? And when inflation does go down, which it does, this is a cyclical thing. This country's been around long enough for us to have enough sample size, right, that these things come in cycles. Unfortunately, most of us don't live to be, 250 and 300 years old. So we don't get a chance to see all the different cycles, right, and experience them all. But nonetheless, they go through cycles. So we will get through this together. OK, so with that being said, I have a tremendous guest that's joining us today. She's taken and been gracious enough to come and spend some time with this MYB community. And Erin Sykes is the chief economist and real estate wealth advisor at Nest Seekers International. She's super involved. I mean, she has been a guest on all the different platforms that are major. From Fox Business News to CNN to NBC Nightly News. You've maybe seen her on Yahoo Finance and more. She holds an MBA from Pepperdine University and a Bachelor in Finance and International Business from Villanova University. So very well educated, very well qualified for what she does. And I've been able to research her, and she just does tremendous things, her and her team. And they've been very gracious again to have her on here. So, Erin, thank you so much for joining here on the Mind Your Business podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for that very warm introduction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's very well deserved. You definitely put in the work for sure. You're doing great things to help our community kind of all around. And so very appreciative there. But for those who haven't had a chance to see you on some of those platforms that I mentioned, and this is their first introduction to you, share with us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So my road to real estate was not a direct one. I actually worked in construction with a family business based in South Jersey on the commercial side, building casinos and schools initially. Always loved the idea of creating something basically from nothing and seeing it rise up. And it was very inspirational. However, I didn't always want to be in South Jersey. I loved Manhattan. I loved Florida. I wanted something that gave me a bit more mobility. And that was where I could really combine my skill sets within construction and marketing background, everything educational and in terms of the finance world, and then move into real estate. And at this point, I work between 5 different markets. I work New York City, the Hamptons, Palm Beach, Miami, and the Jersey Shore. And then I'm also chief economist. So I have that kind of macro view with the economist role, and then I pull down into the micro pockets in each of those markets. So it's been a winding road, and I think that it's possibly best that way because you get to experience life from a different perspective, and then that helps you and your clients in the long term.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And and of course, the NYB community is familiar with this. I'm an economist by background as well, of course, by bachelor major. I'm a business economist. So anytime I get a chance to talk to an economist, I definitely love that. Definitely for sure. Erin, how have you been able to apply kind of your macroeconomic, as you mentioned it, background to real estate? I think that's very interesting. And not a lot of people in the real estate space have that kind of distinct, specialized kind of skill set and ability to view the world. Oftentimes you find that in two different people, quite frankly. So, how are you able to leverage that knowledge and that insight and that training into what you do from a real estate perspective?
Well, I think it's a lot about what you mentioned in your introduction about cycles and about seeing patterns that happen throughout history and not getting boggled down in the day-to-day and concerned about these micro movements, because I am personally a long-term investor. I believe that if you're going to be in a property more than 5 years, you can more or less ignore these hiccups. That said, if you're more of a trader, then they affect you more. So taking those two lenses and being able to then marry clients with what their motivation is when they need to get in and out of properties, that's been the primary bonus. And then also advising nest seekers and we've got 1,500 agents at this point. So being able to train them on, the macro movements, how they affect their micro markets, and how they can then advise their clients and customers in the best capacity, to make sure that they are moving at opportune times and that type of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's tremendous. And 1,500 agents out there is huge. That's a lot of people out serving in the community. So, that's really dynamic. So Erin, in terms of, let's talk a little bit of, 2019 to 2020, right? 2019 seems like 100 years ago.
Seriously.
But it did happen. There was a time before all the pandemic, for those of us that can remember that far back. Kind of walk us through, from your perspective, kind of, how the markets that you served have evolved and changed from 2019 to the advent of the pandemic and kind of through the pandemic now as we're now, the recording of this, we're halfway through 2022 already. What have you kind of seen as trends and kind of, what's kind of brought on some of the impact of where we are today in this more inflationary environment where there's challenges on job growth and the job market is stressed. There's challenges on supply chain. There's challenges and all those things obviously are impacting consumer pricing. What's kind of your thoughts in all of this on how it's morphed and evolved through these last, 2.5 years?
Yeah. So for that, I want to just dive into each one of those individual markets a bit. You have New York City, which of course had a decent pullback in the beginning of the pandemic when people were really scared, and it's vertical living and it's tight quarters and all that type of thing. But if you look at New York City in the long term, it is literally so stable. We are referred to, especially places, that have been consistent over time, like Central Park South. It's basically a savings bond. So you can depend on the city to come back and weather the storm every single time. So right now we're at approximately 2019 prices, maybe even a little bit higher, definitely higher in terms of rentals. So, you have a lot of stability in New York. You just had a very, very small window to get in there at a discount in mid 2020. Then if you look at Miami moves completely differently in general than the rest of the United States, because Miami is driven by the South American markets. So as we see a pullback in a lot of areas right now with inflation and with this uncertainty, if you look to South America, Latin America, they have even more instability and uncertainty right now, which is moving that money into Miami, where they feel like, even if things pull back 5%, that's okay, because in their communities, they have a possibility of losing everything. So they're starting to move more and more money into Miami. Then you have the Hamptons and South Jersey, Jersey Shore, worked similarly, where you saw about a price appreciation, more or less 100% across the board in terms of these shore communities. But the real breakout, kind of all-star from this pandemic, was Palm Beach, where prices went up 200 to 300%.
Wow.
Is insane. It was always an enclave of, the top 1% of 1%, but it very rarely traded in the past. So you had these family compounds that stayed in the family for 2 and 3 generations. So you had, a low tax basis, and you didn't really have comps to go by. Then, with the fallout and people, particularly from New York, the finance companies starting to build out business footprint in West Palm. And then you had this beautiful, beautiful, very idyllic community where you drive over one of the 3 bridges and literally you hear bells because it is so pretty. And that was discovered. So you had everything, basically moving up or staying stable across the board in the United States. We saw price appreciation of about 20%. So if you take those Hamptons, Jersey Shore, and Palm Beach numbers, it's well outpacing the general U.S.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And so, as you come into 2022, with those things being said, are you seeing now, particularly with interest rates, and I want to share with you and share with the audience that I actually called the 75 basis point increase. And I've got some CEOs I was in the conference room with on that morning. And I was asked, not that I'm the expert, of course, but I was asked what was the thought. Everybody in the room agreed that the Fed would probably increase more than 25 basis points. I called 75 basis points. I was proven correct that afternoon. So for whatever that's worth. But as you see, Erin, interest rates start to creep up, and kind of going back to what I was saying in the intro, how there's a generation of people who don't know the market in terms of some of those higher rates, because we've been in this very low rate environment for so long that even I see this a lot of investors. I mean, for a lot of the investors who don't recall some of those higher rate environments, this is a big shock for some of them. And so how are you seeing that? And how are you seeing that seesaw between kind of interest rates and pricing kind of going as, rates are going up? And for lack of a better term, we foresee rates to continue to go up for maybe a couple more cycles. So what's kind of your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think, the Fed has talked about forward guidance, and they keep saying, we're going to tell you exactly what we're doing ahead of time. However, the forward guidance has basically been incorrect the entire time. They say that they're going to raise 25 basis points. They raise 75. So forget forward guidance and start to look to history, because that's where you're going to see true parallels. And, no recession is the same, but they're all the same. So
Sure.
You always come down to over leverage, people that have, basically spread themselves too thin. And they're the ones, as Warren Buffett says, who are going to be caught swimming naked when the tide goes out. So
Right.
If you're responsible, you are prepared for these storms. You predict that they're going to come based on the cycles. It's about 18 years. This happens. So feeling or looking at it that way is less scary. And it also prevents you from making drastic decisions that might hurt you, like selling out at the bottom because you're scared. You don't want to do that. You want to look at the cyclical nature. That said, the way that rates are affecting prices right now does allow some opportunity coming up in the market. We haven't seen that dramatic of price reductions. You start to see them. I watch my multiple MLS every day, and no matter which market, you're starting to see those unrealistic sellers that were looking to hit, new,
I guess kind of new price points.
New price points
they try to ride the market at the high point. Yeah, they try to catch the apex.
Well, that's it. And not every sale is going to be a new high. You have to at some point realize that a certain microcosm trades at that number. If it's new construction or if it is older or if it's lot value, there you see the variability, but you're not going to hit new records every single time. So I think that there's a lot of psychology involved, and we're resetting that psychology. Particularly with sellers. And I think the buyers are actually, they've been more moderate because they recognize that, things should not be bidding wars every single time you go to buy a house. So I think the buyers are reeling in the reins, and the sellers are, as a result, moderating. Now, every time we see a rate hike, and of course that trickles down to mortgages, and particularly first-time buyers and those in the $2 million and under space that are really, really dependent on needing a mortgage.
Sure.
You have a 2 to 3 month lag time before it really starts to affect prices. And that's because people are rate locked. You can have a pre-approval for 1 month, 2 months. And so even if the Fed moves things, you're not so much paying attention to it until it affects your pocketbook. And, that allows for that 2 to 3 month lag. So the 70.5 basis point, increase that we just went through, it's going to hit next month and the month after. So I expect to see further price reductions as a result. Now, those in cash are basically, they're sitting on their hands right now. Those who need mortgages, a little bit more urgency because we're going to continue to see those rates increase, but then you have to marry it with the price reductions that come along with it. So my advice is always, lock your rate now. It gives you 1 month to 2 months of time to kind of try and catch at least part of that falling knife, where you have a price reduction and earlier rate lock, and you as a result could have a big win.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice for all of us, Erin, to really take into account. Erin Sykes is our guest today here on the Minding Your Business podcast, episode 295. Erin, I want to get your thoughts on something that's taken place kind of around the country that I'd love to get your insight on, which is this battle between homeowners or home buyers and investors, right? I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, which is considered a pretty hot investor bed. When you get into some of this Mid-South, kind of Midwestern area, a lot of investors have turned their attention here, particularly coming out of 2008 and 2009, where they're seeing still lower, pricing and, pretty, good margins in terms of the 1% rule on rental income. And so a lot of people have turned their attention here. But what that's caused, and particularly here in Memphis, is this battle between homeowners having to compete with investors for properties, often now in owner-occupied areas. So not so much in more kind of underserved or depressed areas of a city, but now those investors are going into some more prime markets or some more suburban markets where they're either driving prices up because they're coming in as cash buyers, and it's hard for someone with a mortgage, with that contingency in a hot kind of environment to compete. And so that's creating this angst and back and forth between the two. Are you seeing that around in some of the markets that you serve? And is there a solution to that, either short term or long term, to help bridge those two together to see how they can possibly work together, the investor and the home buyer, to create, a thriving community?
Yeah. So this is really where the term cash is king comes from, because it's particularly difficult, not only in these times, but also in the last 2 years if you didn't have cash on hand, because when you're going through bidding wars and you have, potential removal of contingencies, obviously cash is king in that case. And then as we move to the other side of the pendulum, and, there's no more bidding wars, but there are higher mortgage rates, cash is still king. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation, which is so unfortunate, which is what makes it difficult for these first-time home buyers that don't have equity built up in a house to trade into another one when you're starting from scratch. So, my advice at this point is we are dealing with an inflationary environment. It becomes more and more difficult to save every single day. So you really, really have to focus on what your long-term goals are, especially if you and your family are going to live in one area for more than 5 years. I think that's the sweet spot. If you're going to live in an area more than 5 years, you need to focus on buying in that area and really accrue that first 20% that you need to make a purchase. And that needs to be your number one priority above and beyond paying off any bad debt and credit card that is sucking your wealth dry. So that's, number one focus. Now, if you are still trying to find your spot, trying to find where you want to be, and you're going to live somewhere less than 5 years, maybe you can afford to rent. But if you're weighing the pros and cons of paying outrageous rents, because we do have such a single family home market that was bought up by the investors that you mentioned, and now there's a little bit of price fixing going on. So it's particularly difficult when investors are looking to make up for lost time, especially in the cities where they lost a lot of rental income during that first part of 2020. So you're contending with that. But maybe you have the ability to work remotely and you can afford to be a little bit further away from the city. Take those things into consideration right now while we deal with all of these headwinds. Maybe make a few sacrifices. Don't live in the coolest part of town. Live in a nice neighborhood that might be 20 minutes away.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you're speaking to with that, Erin, is, for people to look to be, flexible and adaptable, right? And that's what happens in these kind of more uncertain times is you have to increase your flexibility and your ability to adapt. And so I love what you said about kind of using that 5-year mark as kind of your threshold to say, okay, should I invest in the market? And now still a great time. Because if you think about it, all things considered, even where interest rates are today, they're still extremely low. If you go back and you ask our parents, who were buying houses in the late 70s and the early 80s, I remember, my dad saying, his interest rate with good credit, I mean, he was like 13.5%, 14%, on a mortgage. Right. And so when he sees people complain about, 5.25%, he's like, he just kind of grumbles. All right. But, I think, people have to take all those things into consideration. But like you mentioned, and that's been the impact on the job market for those that are in remote work kind of positions, and they have the benefit of autonomy and things of that nature. They have a little bit more kind of flexibility, right, to kind of choose where they invest and where they live. And I think that's a great thing. Now, the offset of that, or now it's created this dichotomy of people who aren't able to do that, whose job function doesn't allow them to be, remote, where they still have to be on site. And so in those industries, obviously, that's where you're seeing a lot of the challenges with hiring, quite frankly. And so all of this, I think, is just great information for this audience to take back. And I love that about looking at it from a 5-year standpoint. If you're going to be somewhere and you feel like you're going to live there 5 years or more, go ahead and buy so that you can start, recouping your down payment, and then begin building equity. And I think that's going to be one of the keys, because I read a report, Erin, that we're at some kind of, and I don't have it with me to quote, but homeowners now have like record equity available in properties. There's so many billions of dollars now in equity, some of that from price inflation and people who've, invested in property. Can you speak to that a little bit? I apologize, I don't have that here to quote, but I thought that was very fascinating in that people who have significant equity could put themselves in a great position, short-term and long-term, to leverage that in some way to propel them through this period. And once we get through this inflationary period and things stabilize, as historically they do, there's going to be a lot of people in a really great position. Add on top of that, some of the wealth transfer that's going to take place from the older baby boomers to some of the Gen X and millennial population that are now adults and driving the workforce. There's going to be a significant wealth transfer, including real estate in a lot of those cases, because a lot of those baby boomers were kind of the first in their family to own real estate. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on some of that.
Yeah, so basically I have two major thoughts. The first of which is, even if we expect a pullback, and we can pull any number, 5%, 10%, probably somewhere in there, in terms of pricing, again, across the board in general in the United States. We have that 20% appreciation over the last year. So a pullback of 5 to 10% is not going to put us back to zero, right? So you still have more equity built up in your house than you did prior. That said, where I think it's dangerous is for Main Street, not necessarily investors and those who do this professionally, but for Main Street, for people to take out loans against their homes in terms of paying off or buying more property. I think you get into this Ponzi scheme type of situation that could really come crumbling down. That said, to take a loan to pay off, as we mentioned before, bad debt, credit card debt that's running, 26, 30%. I do think that there's smart ways, and you should definitely speak with your advisors and money managers about how to cut down on that bad debt, since you do have this equity built up in your home now and maybe have a little bit more to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. Erin Sykes, again, is our guest today on episode 295 of the Minding Your Business podcast. She's chief economist and real estate wealth advisor at Nest Seekers International. There's an article that came out that you've spoken to, Erin, that I thought was really fascinating in regards to the Hamptons. Now, I've never been to the Hamptons personally, NYB community. That's on my bucket list. But Erin and her team, do significant work in that particular area. And CNBC had a very interesting article that's titled "The Hamptons Summer Rental Market is Facing an Unexpected Chill as Inventory Piles Up and Prices Come Down." And so, it speaks to some really interesting details about, how the Hamptons kind of had this, increase in kind of rentals kind of through the early advent of the pandemic, as, New York and that area, like Erin mentioned, was kind of depressed and that sort of thing. And now you're starting to see, offers on rentals and things like that, kind of dwindle and going down. And the article spoke to some different factors of that, New Yorkers in that area looking to travel abroad and kind of go to other places. This is a population that's often impacted by movement at the Wall Street level. So in terms of investments and things like that. So some of that can have a cascading impact on their financial outlook, and then ultimately their investment in things such as rentals in the Hamptons area. Yeah, can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think it kind of falls in line of a lot of what we've been talking about, but I'd love to get your insight.
Yeah, so the Hamptons is, quite an expensive area. You're looking at properties that can rent from anywhere from $20,000 a month to $1.5 million a month for a rental. So it's a very, very special community in that respect. Right. And you also had a lot of sales over the last couple of years, which can be factored into this pullback in terms of the rentals, because a lot of people, particularly from Manhattan, did not want to be in the city during, the height of the pandemic. It was scary. So they went out and they basically paid whatever they needed to get out to the Hamptons, to be out in nature and have some space. And some of those people then became buyers in the Hamptons. So now they have their cottages that they can go to anytime they want. Others that, just did rent said, okay, well, I've spent the last 2 years in the Hamptons. I want to go someplace else on my vacation. I want to go to Saint-Tropez or to London or to the islands or to wherever. So they're like, you know what? I've had enough Hamptons for now. I'll come back maybe next year or the year after, but
enough Hamptons for now. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's funny when you say, they've had enough Hamptons for now, and I've had enough of my $1.5 million rental. Let me go do something else.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, like, again, the same notion that we were talking about before, where, when you saw price appreciation at the, 100% level in the Hamptons, that price appreciation cannot continue forever. That's completely irrational. So when we start to see these pullbacks in prices, all it is moderating and coming back to, it's still expensive, but it's, not going to go up 50% either this year and 50% the next year and, in perpetuity. It's coming back to a more moderate level. Gotcha.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I just thought that it was a very, kind of interesting market, and it goes back to what we were talking about again, I think there's going to be some great studies once we kind of get through this whole pandemic period, and things begin to stabilize. I think when people look back and they study 2020, 2021, 2022, there's going to be some very interesting findings, from that, some things, blind spots that we're not seeing today. That are going to come out. So I think about that a lot of, one day we're all going to be sitting, it's going to be, 2030, right? And we're going to be kind of past a lot of this stuff. And there's going to be studies looking back 10 years, and there's going to be all kinds of, stuff that from under the rug that's going to come out.
Yeah, it's I mean, hindsight is 20/20, right? You can only see so much through your blinders in the moment. And it's really great if you can objectively step back in that moment. And that's what the best investors do. They kind of take all the emotion out of it. Right. But, you really won't get that full perspective until we're a few years out.
Yeah, definitely. Erin, for those that are looking to, they want to start their investing, career, say now, or if they want to become an agent, say with Nest Seekers International, what's the best way for people to get started? How would you recommend someone getting started, or if you were starting over again, maybe a better way to pose this, if you were starting over again now, today, what would be the first 2 or 3 things that you would do or recommend to get started right now?
Yeah. So to get started as an agent, I would say get licensed as soon as you can. You can get licensed while you're still doing your coursework in college, and you can get an apprenticeship, and you can work with a brokerage. Just start early, because it is a job, it is a career that you can take multiple different directions. You can work as an agent serving other clients. You can work as an agent serving yourself as an investor. So you don't even need to know what exactly you want to do, just that you want to be in the real estate space. You can figure out exactly what you want to do down the line, but just work, check the box, get your license anywhere where you have contacts. So, if you grew up in New Jersey, but now you live in Memphis, get licensed in New Jersey and in Tennessee. And there's certain states that have, kind of shared back and forth. It's a little bit different in each situation, where sometimes there's reciprocity where you only have to take the test. You don't have to take the coursework in another state once you're licensed one place. So do all of that research and check that box first. Then, when you're picking a brokerage, there's different brokerages for each individual person, right? Nest Seekers International, we deal with ultra luxury around the world, which is great. I love that space. However, that means I have to be on the road a lot. So if you don't want to travel all of the time and you want to stay with your community, there might be a different brokerage that is more appropriate for you. So you really have to align your goals with those of your brokerage. And that said, maybe you have an idea of how to expand a certain brokerage. Maybe it's a franchise opportunity, something like that. So, those ideas and those wants and desires will present themselves along the way. I think also what I love is, as we mentioned before, the aspect of construction. And that's why I like working with developers and those that are looking to build, and I'm able to help navigate that process in a different way than most agents are. So if that's interesting to you, maybe work on your general contracting license, maybe do an apprenticeship with a construction company that is in your community. And you're going to really be, heads above your other colleagues and your competition in terms of an agent.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Erin, from an investor standpoint, for someone that's starting out maybe as an investor, what would be your thoughts there in terms of, what's kind of the best way or best advice you'd have for them starting out?
Mm-hmm. So, as an investor, location is everything, right? So make sure that you're really scouting the locations that are growing, getting in a little bit early if you can, because that's how you're going to make your return. And I think the best way to do that I've experienced is to look where the shopping centers and the grocery stores and, Whole Foods, just follow Whole Foods. Wherever they go is going to go up. So I think that,
that's cool. Yeah, that does make sense.
I'm so excited because, I live on Wall Street in New York, and we're getting a Whole Foods here. And I was just like, this means everything for the community.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of times in recent years, people have looked to like Amazon and some of those. If an Amazon factory is going to be built, or if they were rumored to add additional headquarters or things like that, those tend to be trends that people looked at. But I haven't really thought much or heard much of Whole Foods being kind of a guiding, kind of trend to look at where a market may emerge. But it makes total sense. Because Whole Foods kind of has a model that they'll go into some markets and have more of an urban type setup, where they'll go into a downtown area and kind of provide their services and grocery services in a downtown mix, particularly where there's been a lot of growth in, renovations of, multifamily and that sort of thing in an urban market. And then also in the suburban market that has, kind of growth potential, or maybe a more stabilized disposable income population. So that's very interesting. And
they have a partnership, as you mentioned, with Whole or with Amazon. So you're looking at the infrastructure and the distribution methods of two major companies. I think it's a great nod. A lot of people, you're not going to be the only one that's looking to it. So, but it does help to narrow your scope a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to ask you, Erin, too, for someone that's, as an agent and someone who's managing the careers of many agents, there's also the sometimes adversarial battle between wholesalers and agents. I'd love to get your thoughts So for those that are in the wholesaling space, which has really picked up certainly during the pandemic, and those are folks, for the community that's not familiar with that, those are folks that may work with a seller that's in a more distressed situation, or the property is a little bit more distressed, either or. And they're basically assigning a contract to an in cash buyer, and making an assignment fee for doing that. And at times there's been a combative relationship sometimes with agents, where I think there's actually, again, a space for both to exist, as long as the end user, the customer, is taken care of and done right, and has complete trust and confidence, and there's integrity in each transaction. I think there's a space for both. But what are your thoughts, Erin, on kind of that relationship between the wholesaler, which I don't know if you see it in some of your markets like the Hamptons and some of the markets that you work, but particularly in some of the Midwestern Southern markets, we see a lot more kind of wholesaling that's taken place. And unfortunately, there have been, like every industry and every kind of lane, there's unscrupulousness that takes place. But what are your thoughts on kind of, how those two entities can kind of maybe possibly work together to, again, deliver for the markets?
Yeah. So this is something that we haven't seen a lot in at least our markets within the last 2 years, because they've been such strong markets. However, as we start to, turn the corner, and who knows where we're going to end up over the next 6 months to a year, I expect to see some more of it, and, sheriff's auctions and that type of thing. So a lot of times, as agents, we get requests in for Zillow listings that are in pre-foreclosure or foreclosure. And I know what most agents do. Most agents just say, you don't want that, and they try to change the topic. So that said, I think that, that's because they don't even know what to do with it. And they don't realize that they can, help their client in that capacity and still make a commission. And if there is transparency and there's, representation involved and all of that type of stuff. So I think that, like you said, there's a way to do it. It's going to be case by case. And it really, really comes down to transparency and honesty. And, if you truly don't know anything about that situation as an agent, A, you should learn. And B, communicate that to your client. Don't just say, hey, you don't want that, because it might be a good opportunity for your client.
Yeah. Absolutely. So thank you for that, Erin. That's great insight. And I do want to shout out a few folks that have commented. Erica, we got an amen from her. Thank you so much. Tommy, always good to see him. He says, gives his thumbs up as well. Carol says, go, Erin.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, so I appreciate you all kind of sharing your comments there. And let's see, who is that? John says, I bought in the Miami area. It's been great. Okay. So we had someone that's actually bought property down in Miami recently that's sharing some of his, I don't want to read his full comment, but looks like he's had a positive experience down in Miami, which is good. I imagine most people do. So thank you all, and keep your comments coming. And obviously look in the show notes for this episode. You'll be able to see a link on how to connect with Erin and her team. And matter of fact, since it's going to be in the show notes, Erin, if you want to share, how can people connect with you and connect with your team? And if they happen to be in one of your markets or interested in investing in one of your markets or renting in one of your markets, how can they connect with you and your team?
Sure. So my email is erinS@nestseekers.com. Basically, if you put Erin Sykes into, Google search, all my information will come up, or Sykes Style, SYKESSTYLE on pretty much any, of the social media platforms, or my name on LinkedIn, whatever. You can get to me. I'm not, a private person.
Excellent. So you heard that, NYB. So Erin is available. So if you have real questions, and or if you happen to be in the market, definitely reach out to Erin and connect. She can get you plugged in and kind of get you in the right direction for what you're looking for your real estate needs. Or if you just have questions about the market or questions about something you've heard in today's episode or other interviews that Erin does, definitely feel free to reach out to her and her team, and they will definitely accommodate you. This has been a tremendous conversation, Erin. To say the least. I have learned a lot. I think a lot of us that are listening have learned a ton. Last thing, so for you personally, how does family? What's kind of the impact of family with what you do, and however that takes form for you? How has family been supportive of you and kind of your career as you've been able to progress? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So my family business, construction business, has been in its form since 1901. So I'm the fifth generation roofer and sheet metal worker in Atlantic City. So it's definitely been a very supportive network. And in terms of, I don't have children. So that makes my life, frankly, a little bit more flexible to be on the road. And I understand that dynamic might change one day. And so I'm trying to get it all in right now, and be as many places and build up the company in as many places as possible. So it was really my parents that brought me to Florida too. So when they retired down there, I was visiting them. So I've really my career has followed where my family is, because I want to be close to them, and that's how I feel comfortable. And I expect it to continue that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely congratulations as a fifth generation business owner. That's becoming, unfortunately, more and more rare in today's time. So to have a family business that's kind of developed and curated itself since 1901, and we're now in 2022. That's a big accomplishment. So that speaks very well to your family's ability to, and you think about all the cycles they've been through since 1904. what the world was, even in that market in 1901 to 2022. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
You've been through, all the world wars. I mean, you've been through the civil rights movement. You've been through the 70s oil issues, the 80s with deregulation. I mean, through the 90s with NAFTA, September 11th. I mean, good grief. I mean, you've been through and survived it all. So that speaks to the resiliency of your family to go through. I mean, the Great Depression.
My grandfather used to say because my grandfather lived through at least 3 of those generations, if not 4. And he said, we're roofing and sheet metal, but we do anything from bobby pins to airplane wings, because there were times during, all of these different situations where nobody was building. So we had a metal shop. So you need bobby pins, we'll make you bobby pins. You need your airplane fixed, we'll figure out how to do it. You need I kid you not, monkey cage built for the Big Apple Circus. Fine, we'll do that too.
Yeah.
So it was any type of metal work we figured out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's a great lesson for those that are in the entrepreneur space, is that that ability to be flexible. And as the environment changes, I used the word earlier, the ability to adapt. And that's what that speaks to is, do you have the ability to adapt? Where some businesses, and you could probably attest to this, Erin, they're very set in their ways. And so as the environment adapts around them, they don't then adapt. And so there's many examples, of course, of that at the corporate level, right? Many people point to, say, Blockbuster Video as a company that failed to, at least apparently, to adapt quick enough as the environment around it changed and adapted. And so that speaks to your family's, again, resiliency and then ability to adapt as that environment adapts and still provide value, leveraging their existing infrastructure, but to provide value in a different way as that demand shifted. So again, that speaks to why you have that longevity. So definitely shout out and kudos to you and your family for that, Erin. Listen, I can't thank you enough for this. I've taken up so much of your time, but this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing this insight. We got to have you back as the environment, again, evolves and adapts. Love to get your insight on that. And maybe we'll be past all this pandemic stuff and we'll have a few laughs about it.
Awesome. I am looking forward to turning the corner of everything that we've been through for the last couple of years. So
yeah, absolutely. No doubt. Erin Sykes is our guest here today, episode 295. She's chief economist and real estate wealth advisor at Nest Seekers International. Check the show notes. You can connect with her and let her know that you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. Erin, thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week. And would love to be a resource if I can here from Memphis. So definitely reach out to me or have your team reach out to me if you find that I can be a resource in any way.
Awesome. Looking forward.
Excellent. So Erin Sykes was our guest today here on episode 295. Listen, I'm going to get out of here. NYB community, thank you so much for your continued support of me and this podcast. Don't forget to check me out, champ10k.com. If you happen to be in the Memphis area and you're looking to start up a business and you're going to be in a more underserved area of our city, don't forget River City Capital. We are the only homegrown CDFI, which is Community Development Financial Institution here in the Memphis, Tennessee, Shelby County market. And so if you're looking for funding up to $250,000 for your business, whether a startup or existing business, definitely reach out to us. rivercitycapital.org is where you can do that. And don't forget to connect with me at champ10k.com. 3 things that unite us all, no matter where you come from, no matter what side of the tracks you're from, what side of the ocean that you're from, what side of the world you're from. There are 3 things that unite us all. We all want to be a little bit better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and a little bit better for our communities. And if we keep those 3 things in mind with everybody that we interact with, pandemic or not, Ukraine or not, inflation or not, interest rates are not. All those things are going to ebb and flow. But if we keep those three things in mind, we all want to be a little better for ourselves, our families, and our communities. We can all collectively make this place just a little bit better. Ron Brooks, Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. Go be great.